Storyteller is a free open source tool that allows you to turn your personal programming sessions into animated, annotated, worked examples that describe how and why your code evolves. The output of the tool, called playbacks, guide others through the twists and turns in one or more programming sessions and gives the viewer the chance to understand why you made the decisions that you did. Here I have a collection of playbacks that I used for a class that I was teaching. I'll select one and view it. This is a playback in the browser. The title and description at the top of the page give the viewer some context about what they're about to see. This particular example is showing how tail recursion can be used to calculate the square root using the Clojure programming language. No software is needed to view a playback other than a web browser. The playback is distributed in a single self-contained web page. No active web server is needed. These can be posted online to a static server or sent through email. This playback shows the character-by-character recreation of how I wrote the code with an adjustable fixed amount of time in between each one of the events. The playback pauses at significant points where the author wants to highlight something of interest. That's changed since the last pause point. The author can link comments to highlighted sections of code. When a viewer clicks on a comment, the associated code is highlighted. The comments can include text, hand-drawn images, screenshots, and video explanations. The developer can explain what they tried, what worked and what didn't. They can describe their data structures and algorithms with whiteboard-style drawings. They can run the program with multiple inputs and show screenshots of different outputs. A developer can create a video recording of themselves discussing the code at a pause point. After some time to reflect, a developer can use the tool to tell the story of how some code has evolved over time. These comments are different from code comments because they're linked not only to a place in the code, but to a point in time in its development. A developer can target different audiences with the same code by creating different playbacks for different viewers. Playbacks can be shared by instructors for students who are learning to code. They can be used by anyone giving a formal code demonstration to others to speed along the demo and to ensure there are no errors in the live performance. They can be shared by professional software development team members when one learns a valuable lesson to spread knowledge on the software team. They can be shared by team members to prepare others for a code review of code. Or they can be created as a personal journal so software developers can reflect on what they've done in the past. Not everyone will necessarily want to see the actual animation of the code being written. This is especially true for programming sessions that span days or weeks. So here's the exact same playback where the animation is skipped and the code is shown only at the comment points. The changes since the last comment point are colored in blue so a viewer can identify what's changed since the last comment. There are controls to move from comment to comment like this and keyboard shortcuts to give the viewer more control of how to navigate a playback. If a viewer can live without the animation, they can typically get through the code faster and just see the code at the points the author wants them to focus on. As I mentioned before, the playbacks are what the audience sees. All that's needed is a web browser to view a playback. Next, I'll show how to create a playback from the software developer's perspective. In order to create a playback, some additional tools are required. But first, let me give a high-level overview of the system. A code demonstration is a valuable teaching tool. I use these as an instructor, but they can also be used by professional software developers who are teaching each other. Whether I'm explaining ideas to students or fellow software developers, I'm always thinking about how to explain concepts where code is the star of the show. With code demos, the audience sees how the code evolves. They see it grow from small to large and from simple to more complex. However, this evolution can take quite a bit of time when done live. Sometimes hard to keep the viewers interested in the whole demo. When using Storyteller, a developer writes code using an editor like normal, and then they run the code, debug it, and revise it naturally without requiring perfection or some grand performance. Later, a developer can reflect on what they've done in the editor and tell the story of how their code evolved. If there are some uninteresting parts, there's no need to comment on them, and they won't waste the viewer's time. Storyteller runs in the background as it records text edits and file operations. It's language independent and can be used with any text file. Currently, it works as a plugin to the popular Visual Studio Code text editor. At any point, a developer can ask to see a playback just like the one I showed. At regular intervals, a developer can review what they've done to reflect on what worked or didn't, and why, and then they can annotate those reflections. These comments will show up in future playbacks. What is novel about this type of documentation is that these are comments not only referring to a place in the code, but to a point in time of the development or evolution of that code. The annotated playbacks can then be shared with others. They might be shared with students, fellow developers on a team, potential employers, etc. As I mentioned before, the tool currently works as an extension to the Visual Studio Code editor. Next, after Visual Studio Code is installed, the Storyteller plugin must be installed. There's a web page to search for plugins. Just search for the one named Storyteller and it will bring you to the project download page. Alternatively, the plugin can be installed directly from Visual Studio Code in the Extensions tab on the left side of the screen. Again, just type in Storyteller and it can be downloaded directly into the editor. Okay, next I'm going to write a simple program that explains variables, assignment statements, simple arithmetic, and string interpolation in the Ruby programming language. First thing I'll do is create a new folder somewhere on my file system. Then I'm going to open that folder with Visual Studio Code. So I'll go to File, Open Folder. Okay, it's giving me a little prompt here that says you can use Storyteller by selecting Storyteller Start Tracking. So by default, Storyteller is not on. You have to actively turn it on. And I'll do that next by going down here and clicking the Start Storyteller button. What happens next is it's going to prompt me for the developer name and email. Okay, so Storyteller tracks who's responsible for all the changes that are being made. Next, I'm going to create a file. Called dogh.rb. And now I'm just going to begin to code as I normally would. So the goal of this program is to convert a human age to an equivalent dog age. And in the first version of the program, I'm just going to take the human age and divide it by 7 to see how many groups of 7 years there are in the human's age. Okay, next I'm going to run the program. And we'll see that 44 years is equivalent to 6 dog years. I'm going to go back to the tool and I am going to invoke this command palette. And this has brought up a playback with that code. I'm just going to play it back. And now I'm going to add some comments. Okay, now I'm going to treat the first human year exactly the same as the first dog year. And when I run the program, I get the expected different value. Now I'll describe that comment in the playback. I can add pictures to comments. I can either draw pictures, or here I'm just going to capture a screenshot. Next, I'll move through all the comments and see that they're all there. The last thing I'll do is add a title and a description, and this playback will be ready to distribute. The easiest way to do that is to just use the browser's save functionality. This will download the page to your hard drive, and then you can share that with others. There's some documentation about how to use Storyteller, including how to install it, how a viewer moves through a playback, and how to create playbacks, including some best practices that I've discovered while using the tool, and other features. For example, it's also a simple version control system with branching and merging capabilities. Here are the links to the documentation and the plugin. In addition, I've created a couple of collections of playbacks for my courses. These might be valuable to understand how I've been using the tool. So that completes my short introduction to Storyteller. Please feel free to reach out if you have any comments or suggestions.